Be informed, be inspired. Join us for the Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show. Tune in and listen for both modern and ancient wisdom on all things maternity, parenting and sacred women's business, right here on the Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show.
He's just the most tiniest little gorgeous thing that I just fell in love with.
Hold your hand.
I felt like I was given a sort of a message, because it's like, why? You ask, why me? And I just felt like there was a message that came through that it was meant to be.
And you are the mother of your baby child, the one to whom you gave life.
Welcome to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show. Our show is coming to you from the studios of BFM in the heart of Byron Bay and is broadcasting across Australia on the Community Radio Network. You're here with me, Lara Martin. When you're pregnant, for most parents, it's a time of great joy, anticipation, hopes and dreams of having a baby and raising a family. However, in Australia, about 1 in 120 babies will be born still or die within the first month of life. It's a heartbreaking and tragic to have fallen pregnant, carried a baby for however long, birthed a baby, become a parent, yet be empty-handed. This episode we feature when a baby dies, being with death and grief. We'll be hearing about ways you can support friends and family members who are experiencing the loss of their baby, the healing journey, or becoming whole again. We'll also be featuring the stories of 3 different parents sharing their experience. My guest for this episode features Denise Love, founder of Life Options and Women's Health Cambodia, where Denise spends much of the year working with birthing mothers and traditional birth attendants to bring about safer, healthier mothers and babies.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Denise, how did you get involved with working in pregnancy loss and neonatal loss?
Firstly, my mother died when I was a child, so I was always really interested about how grief manifests itself in people's lives. And then I've had 10 pregnancies myself, and I've actually had 8 miscarriages. I'm a nurse anyway, and I studied midwifery for a while, and it became very clear to me that at every birth there was a possible death. It always just felt like that.
Can you tell us a bit more about that experience? What happens from your understanding when a couple or a mother has a loss?
So what it appears to me, it's like a tidal wave washes over a whole community. When a woman loses a child, whether she's alone or with somebody else as a partner, it has a really profound effect on an entire community, and I think most people who've lived in community where a baby has died will understand that. First of all, nobody knows what to say to the mother. Secondly, when they do say it, they're not sure whether it's right. And thirdly, they're really happy that it's all kind of over and swept under the carpet and let's move on. They drop off a few casseroles, they visit her, they bring flowers, they do all the necessary things because they're facing their own kind of, not their own mortality, but the mortality of the loss of the dreams of their own children often. And then within 6 weeks, people have forgotten and moved on. And a woman's left with a hole in her heart for the rest of her life, let alone a hole in the crib or a hole in her bed or a hole at her breast.
What are some of the practical ways that friends and family can support a woman and her partner experiencing this loss?
So I think the thing to remember is when the tidal wave has gone away, which is about 6 weeks, that's when a woman needs to keep telling the story. When we all get a bit tired of the story, it's time to start asking the question, tell me about your pregnancy, tell me about your baby that was born or not born, tell me what your experience was, share it with me. Because nobody wants to hear the sadness, nobody wants to see the woman cry, nobody wants to know the truth, basically. So for me, it's kind of like being available to the woman early days, but my experience is most women want a lot of space and a little time alone in that time. They might want a very close friend, and they can't always talk to their partner either. And if there is a man or a woman in their lives around that time, they grieve it very differently. Don't be there all in a rush. Don't rush to the woman and try and be helpful, but invite the woman for dinner, or go and sit in and have dinner with her and say, do you want to talk about your baby? Do you want to talk about the pregnancy? If she doesn't, talk about everything else. If she does, hear the story for the 7th time. Keep hearing the story. I really feel the more we tell the story, the more we're heard, truly heard, without fear from the person listening, then the quicker we move through, the story becomes in our heart, and we get to demystify some of the feelings around it, and we just start to develop a long understanding of what's missing in our hearts.
But you are not alone in this, and you are not alone in this.
This is Stephanie's story. Stephanie was 18 years old at the time with her first pregnancy. At 24 weeks pregnant, Stephanie started having some pains 3 times over the next 24 hours. Stephanie had told her care providers she was still experiencing pain. Each time, Stephanie was turned away, saying there's nothing to be concerned about. Stephanie thought that everything was going to be okay. She was 18, inexperienced, and trusted the hospital. Midnight came along, and Stephanie was now experiencing extreme pain. Her partner rushes her to the hospital.
By the time I presented to emergency, she's on the phone. She's on the phone to their delivery suite, and she's timing my contractions. I'm in a wheelchair. I'm doubling over in pain. Next thing I know, I'm being rushed up to the delivery suite. I'm being told that my baby's going to be born, be prepared, and I'm just still have no idea what's about to happen. I don't understand the risk of a baby being born at 24 weeks. There's 10 people in the room. There's a team preparing a neonatal bed. There's about 5 doctors waiting there. There's 5 doctors around me, people rushing in and out. There's alarms going off. I've still no idea what's going on. And then Jacob was delivered, and he's just the most tiniest little gorgeous thing that I just fell in love with as soon. Of course, I'd just been carrying him for 24 weeks, but just to see him alive and to see his arms and legs moving, just as any mother you could imagine, just your heart's just absolutely exploding with love for this baby. He was rushed off to the intensive care neonatal unit. Finally, they let me go in a wheelchair to Jacob's bedside, and I just have a very clear memory of the staff looking at me with such despair and such... I really felt their hearts breaking for me and for Jacob, but I didn't sense that. I just felt so much love for my baby, and he's here, and oh my God, look at my divine little boy. And I put my finger in his hand, and he squeezed my finger, and I tickled his foot, and he felt that tickle, and his body moved, and I watched his chest rise up and down, and he was breathing, and to me he was just this beautiful little boy who I just wanted to kiss and cuddle, but I couldn't. Later that day he started to decline, and I still felt a lot of hope that he was going to be okay. And it became more obvious throughout the day that he was not going to be okay, and by 3:30 in the afternoon he passed away. The pain, I would say, is the most undescribable. I cannot use words. The most traumatising, horrifying experience. And then, I like to think that Jacob's birth and the day he died was just the beginning of the event, because it was leaving the hospital without a baby in your arms is another heartbreak. It's the next day when you wake up and you're not pregnant anymore is another heartbreak. It is the phone calls. It is having to organise a funeral. It is having to fill in the forms to register his birth. It is the ongoing process. You were pregnant, you were at the supermarket, you were talking to the cashier, you were pregnant, you go back to the supermarket, you're not pregnant anymore. And it's all of those really, those small things that you don't actually think about. I forgot to cancel a few doctor's appointments, and it's 2 weeks after the loss. I'm getting called from the medical receptionist saying, "Hi Steph, you got an appointment today, you haven't turned up, would you like to reschedule?" I don't need an appointment anymore because I don't have a baby. And it's an event. Losing a baby is an event, and it's not a time. There's no time period, and it's ongoing.
And from your understanding, Denise, why do you think it's so hard societally and culturally to be with death and grief, and particularly around the death of a baby?
So it's my understanding that most people say that losing a baby is harder than losing anybody. Number one, I don't actually believe that's true. I think death is death is death is death. So number one, I think we've got to stop putting this value on death that, oh, that's so hard, I don't even know how to talk about it. We're not actually thinking of the woman who's lost the child. We're thinking about what it would be like for us if we've lost our child. So we go into our own feelings far too quickly, and we make this assumption of how we feel about it might be how she's feeling about it. So let's stop making assumptions about how people feel, and let's try and tell the truth as women as well, how we do feel. Let's allow other women to tell their story, no matter how wonderful it is during birth, because that's another time we don't want to hear, or a time when we're desperately disappointed that we're not going to see that child as an adult woman, even if we were just a little bit pregnant or we had a newborn child. Let's let the woman have great disappointment of the loss, whatever the loss is that she's grieving.
What do you suggest for listeners, for family, friends and acquaintances to actually be okay with death and grief and loss, to actually be able to hold that space for another person?
So when I talk to mummies and say, what is it you need from people? And it could be a person who's just had the loss, or it could be a person 10 years or 15 years later. Number one, they say, I don't know. And number two, they said silence. Just be with me. Just come and hear my story, or just come and have a cup of tea and sit in silence with me. Don't try and fix me. Don't try to fix the gap. But what they definitely don't need is somebody else's story, number one. And they don't need anybody trying to justify it. Well, at least you didn't get to know them. At least you didn't fall in love with them. All sorts of stories about, why you shouldn't be grieving. So most mummies I sit with say, when they say nothing at all, it's sometimes the most powerful. So to greet a mummy who's just lost a child, or baby's died, or however's happened, an early miscarriage, just look deep in her eyes and let her know that you know. I find that so powerful.
Denise, you mentioned you can't fix that loss, and absolutely someone else can't come in and fix that loss. I'm wondering, does it ease up? Does it get that pain and that grief get better over time?
I honestly think you carry it for the rest of your life. But what you do is start to develop tools as we grow up and become adults and more adult and wiser. We start to develop tools that do make it easier. And I guess as I tell you that, it's in reverse. As an 8-year-old little girl, my mother died, and I know that's not a newborn baby situation. But I know that it took many, many years for that hole to start to be filled. And I know that it was just my development of skills that helped me to manage that pain. So I don't think anything gets easier. I think there'll always be a moment of that deep pain, but thankfully, I truly believe each and every one of you who's experienced loss will finally come to some sort of peace with it.
But I can't move the mountains for you.
This is Suzanne's story. It happened 28 years ago. At full term, and after a beautiful, idealistic pregnancy, labour and birth, Suzanne birthed her first baby girl, Kaya. In less than 24 hours later, Kaya had passed away. One of the hardest parts for Suzanne was that at the time, 28 years ago, there wasn't any real support.